Hi there, and welcome back to the garden. I'm Eleanor. Before we begin, I want to hear your deer stories down in the comments, and I have a feeling there are going to be some good ones. Have you ever gone out in the morning, coffee in hand, ready to admire your beautiful tulips, only to find them nibbled down to bare stubs overnight? Has a deer ever looked you dead in the eye through your kitchen window while casually eating your prized hostas? Tell me your worst deer heartbreak. I promise you, you are not alone, and today we are going to fight back, the smart way. Here's the truth about deer that took me years to fully understand, and I want to save you that time. There is no such thing as a truly deer-proof plant. If a deer is hungry enough, in a hard enough winter, it will nibble almost anything at least once. But there absolutely are plants that deer strongly dislike and will avoid nearly every single time, given any other choice at all. And once you understand why deer avoid these plants, it's almost always their strong fragrance, their fuzzy or leathery or prickly texture, or a natural toxicity. You can start building a whole beautiful front yard around plants that deer simply pass right by. And here's the best part, the part that turns this from a frustrating chore into something wonderful. Many of these deer-resistant plants are also some of the most gorgeous, most fragrant, most beloved plants in all of gardening. This isn't a consolation prize list. This is a genuinely stunning front yard that just happens to come with a very effective, very natural deer deterrent built right in. So today I'm sharing 10 plants that deer reliably avoid, why they avoid them, and exactly how to use them to build a front yard that's both beautiful and deer resistant. And do stay with me to the very end because the last one is a personal favorite of mine, and it might just surprise you. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and if you love an easy, beautiful yard, tap that subscribe button. It truly helps this little channel grow. All right, let's outsmart those deer together. Let's begin with one of the very best deer deterrent plants there is, and one of the most beloved, lavender. Here's exactly why deer leave lavender alone, and understanding this reasoning will help you spot other deer-resistant plants on your own. Deer, like most of us, explore the world partly through smell, and they have a strong aversion to intensely aromatic, oily, resinous foliage. It simply doesn't smell or taste appealing to them. Lavender's powerful, perfumed fragrance, which we humans find so calming and lovely, is precisely the kind of strong herbal scent that sends deer looking elsewhere for their dinner. So while you're enjoying that gorgeous fragrance drifting up the front walk, the deer are giving your lavender a wide and respectful berth. And of course, lavender gives you so much more than just deer resistance. Those soft, silvery green leaves and tall purple flower spikes bring genuine elegance to a front yard. The bees and butterflies flock to it all summer, and it's wonderfully drought-tolerant once established. In fact, it prefers to be left a little dry and neglected, which makes it an easy, low-fuss choice for a busy gardener. The two things lavender truly insists on are full sun and excellent drainage. It cannot abide wet, soggy feet, especially through winter. So give it a sunny spot with well-drained, even slightly poor soil, and it will reward you for years. For your design, plant it right along the front walk, where you'll brush against it and release that wonderful scent, or as a fragrant, deer-resistant low hedge lining the whole front of your property, a living, perfumed barrier that looks absolutely beautiful while quietly doing its job. My tip: give it a light trim every year right after it finishes blooming, shaping it into a tidy mound without ever cutting into the old woody stems, and it will stay full, fragrant, and deer-resistant for a decade or more. Fragrant, beautiful, and a genuine deer deterrent, lavender is the perfect place to start. Now let's add some structure that deer typically leave well alone with number 2. Number 2 brings us a plant that gives your front yard elegant, year-round structure, and that deer generally find quite unappealing to eat: boxwood. Now, I'll be honest with you, because I always want to be, boxwood isn't at the very top of the deer resistance list the way lavender is, and in a truly hungry winter, a desperate deer might take an occasional nibble. but in the vast majority of yards, deer consistently pass right over it, largely because the leaves have a bitter taste and a dense, tough texture that deer find distinctly unappetizing compared to the soft, tender plants they'd much rather eat. So it earns a well-deserved place on this list as one of the more reliably deer-resistant shrubs you can build your front yard structure around. And structure is exactly what Boxwood gives you, in spades. That crisp, tailored evergreen green holds its color and shape all year long, including through the depths of winter, making your home look polished, intentional, and cared for in every single season. It frames a doorway beautifully, lines a walkway with elegant precision, and gives your whole yard that sense of good bones that so many designers rely on. Boxwood is also low maintenance and slow growing, so once you've shaped it, it stays put for a very long time. Give it well-drained soil and a bit of sun, and just one light trim in late spring keeps it looking sharp. For your design, use it to frame your front door in a matching pair, to line a walkway, or as tidy foundation plantings beneath your windows. Structure that deer are unlikely to bother, holding your whole design together. My tip: don't plant it too deep. Keep the root ball right at the soil line for good health. And if deer pressure is especially heavy in your area, a light application of deer repellent spray in the toughest winter months adds an extra layer of insurance on top of Boxwood's natural resistance. Structure that deer mostly leave alone. Boxwood anchors a deer-resistant design. Now let's add a long season of hazy deer-repelling color with number 3. Number 3 gives you a long, elegant, silvery blue season of color, and its strongly aromatic foliage is one of the very best deer deterrents in the whole garden: Russian sage, or perovskia. The secret here is exactly the same principle we saw with lavender. Russian sage has intensely fragrant, almost sage-like aromatic foliage that deer find genuinely off-putting. Brush against it, and you'll release that same pungent herbal scent that tells deer quite clearly, "Keep moving, there's nothing appealing here for you." It's remarkably reliable, and it's one of the plants deer-resistant gardening experts recommend most often. And beyond its deer resistance, Russian sage is simply gorgeous. Picture an airy, shrubby plant with silvery white stems, topped for months, from midsummer right into fall, with a soft, misty haze of tiny lavender blue flowers that sway and shimmer in the slightest breeze. That long, hazy, elegant cloud brings a wonderfully modern, dreamy quality to a front yard, and it pairs beautifully with the warm golds and yellows of coneflowers or black-eyed Susans if you have them, or simply on its own as a soft, swaying border. It's also one of the toughest, most carefree plants you can grow. It loves full sun and heat. It's extremely drought-tolerant once established. It actually prefers to be left lean and a little dry, and it asks for almost nothing from you. For your design, use it toward the middle or back of a sunny bed, in groups for that big, hazy effect, or as a fragrant, deer-resistant screen along a property line where deer tend to wander through. My tip: in late winter or very early spring, cut the whole plant back hard to about a foot from the ground. It looks like a bundle of bare sticks for a few weeks, but it roars back fuller and more floriferous every single year. That one yearly cut is the entire care plan. A long, hazy, deer-repelling season of blue, Russian sage is a genuine gift. Now let's bring in some cheerful spring color that deer won't dare touch with number 4. Number 4 brings us to a completely different kind of deer defense, and it's one of the most foolproof on this entire list: daffodils. Here's why daffodils are so wonderfully reliable, and this reason is different from the aromatic foliage we've talked about so far. Daffodil bulbs, stems, and leaves all contain natural toxic compounds called licorine, which make the plant genuinely unpalatable, and even mildly poisonous if eaten in quantity. Deer instinctively know this, generation after generation, and they simply do not touch daffodils. Not the leaves, not the flowers, not the bulbs buried in the soil. In all my years of gardening in deer country, I have never once seen a nibbled daffodil, and neither have most gardeners I know. It's about as close to a guarantee as you'll find in this whole list, and what a joyful plant to have that guarantee with. Daffodils burst into cheerful trumpets of sunny yellow, cream, and white in very early spring, often before almost anything else has woken up, announcing that winter is finally, truly over. They're the very picture of hope and renewal in the garden, and a big drift of them blooming along your front walk in March or April is one of the purest pleasures of the whole gardening year. They're also astonishingly easy. You plant the bulbs once in fall, and they come back reliably, year after year for decades, often multiplying into bigger, more generous drifts, all on their own, completely free of charge. They ask for very little: well-drained soil and a sunny to partly sunny spot. For your design, plant them in generous, naturalistic drifts along a walkway, under deciduous trees where they'll get spring sun before the leaves fill in, or scattered through a lawn for a cheerful, informal meadow look. My tip: after the flowers fade, resist the urge to cut back or braid the leaves right away. Let that foliage die back naturally on its own, because the plant is using those leaves to gather energy for next year's blooms. It looks a little untidy for a few weeks, but it's the secret to daffodils that keep coming back stronger every single year. Toxic to deer, joyful to us, and utterly reliable, daffodils are a genuine guarantee. Now let's add another bulb with that same deer-proof toxicity and a truly striking look with number 5. Number 5 gives you one of the most striking, sculptural, conversation-starting flowers you can grow, and it shares that same wonderful deer-proof quality: ornamental alliums. Alliums are part of the onion and garlic family, and just like daffodils have their natural toxin, alliums have their own powerful natural defense, a strong oniony, sulfurous scent and taste that deer, along with rabbits, find thoroughly unappealing. It's the very same reason you don't see deer raiding a vegetable garden's onion patch. That pungent family trait, which barely registers to us once the flowers are blooming, is a complete turnoff to a browsing deer. And the flowers themselves are pure magic. Alliums send up tall, slender stems topped with perfect spheres of tiny star-shaped flowers in shades of purple, lavender, white, and pink, some as small as a golf ball, some as large and dramatic as a grapefruit. They look like something from a fantasy garden, whimsical and architectural all at once, and they add a wonderful vertical, sculptural element that rises gracefully above your other spring perennials. Once the blooms fade, even the dried seed heads stay attractive, adding structural interest well into summer. They're planted as bulbs in fall, just like daffodils, and they're wonderfully easy and low maintenance. Full sun and well-drained soil is really all they ask, and they naturalize and return reliably for years. For your design, tuck them among your other perennials, where their tall globes rise up through lower plants for a delightful surprise, or plant a bold row of the larger varieties as a striking, deer-proof focal statement along the front of a bed. My tip: plant allium bulbs in fall alongside plants that will grow up and hide their yellowing foliage as it dies back in early summer. Catmint or daylilies work beautifully for this, so you get the whimsical allium blooms without ever having to look at fading leaves. Sculptural, whimsical, and completely deer-proof, alliums are a true garden treasure. Now let's bring in a beloved, old-fashioned favorite that deer also avoid, with number 6. Number 6 is one of the most beloved romantic flowers in all of gardening, and it happens to be one that deer generally leave in peace: the peony. Peonies aren't quite as bulletproof as our toxic bulbs, but deer do tend to find the foliage and stems unappealing, likely due to a combination of texture and mild bitterness, and in most yards, peonies come through a deer's visit completely untouched. Combine that reasonable resistance with the fact that peonies are so absurdly, extravagantly beautiful, and it's easy to see why so many deer-weary gardeners plant them by the dozen. And oh, what a display peonies put on! In late spring, they produce enormous, lush, often deliciously fragrant blooms in soft, blush pinks, pure whites, deep magentas, and creamy yellows, so full and voluptuous they look almost too perfect to be real. A peony in full bloom is the kind of flower that makes visitors stop in their tracks, and the fragrance of some varieties is genuinely intoxicating, drifting across the whole front yard on a warm spring evening. Here's the truly wonderful part about peonies. They are extraordinarily long-lived. A well-planted peony can live and bloom faithfully for 50 years or more, often outlasting the very house it was planted beside. It's a plant you genuinely plant for the future, for the gardeners who will tend it long after you. Give them full sun and rich, well-drained soil and be patient the first year or two while they settle in. They reward that patience tenfold once established. For your design, use them as a stunning specimen near the entry, or in a row for a spectacular deer-resistant spring hedge of color and fragrance. My tip? Plant the roots with the eyes, the little pink buds, no more than an inch or two below the soil surface. Planted too deep, peonies famously refuse to bloom, which is the single most common peony mistake. Get that depth right, and you have a fragrant, deer-resistant heirloom for generations. Romantic, fragrant, long-lived, and deer-resistant, the peony is a genuine heirloom. Now let's add some elegant color that deer find distinctly distasteful with number 7. Number 7 brings elegant, ruffled, jewel-toned blooms, and like our daffodils and alliums, it has a natural chemical defense that keeps deer well away. The bearded iris. Bearded iris contains natural compounds in its leaves and rhizomes that are mildly toxic and quite bitter, and deer have learned, generation after generation, to leave this plant entirely alone. It's a wonderfully reliable choice for exactly the kind of persistent deer pressure that ruins so many other flower beds. And the blooms themselves are extraordinary. Bearded iris produces tall, elegant flower stalks topped with ruffled, silky blooms in the most extraordinary range of colors. Deep, velvety purples, warm golds, soft blush pinks, crisp whites, and stunning bicolors that shift from one shade to another within a single flower. Each bloom has a distinctive beard of fuzzy texture along its lower petals, which is exactly where the name comes from, and the overall effect is something between a butterfly and a piece of fine art. Bearded iris is also wonderfully tough and low maintenance. It loves full sun and, importantly, wants its rhizomes, the thick root-like structures it grows from, planted shallowly, with the top actually exposed to the sun and air, rather than buried like a typical bulb. Good drainage is essential, since soggy conditions invite rot. For your design, plant it in a sunny border where its tall, elegant stalks can be admired at eye level, or in generous drifts of a single color for a bold, jewel-toned statement that deer will simply pass by. My tip? After a clump has bloomed for 3 or 4 years and becomes crowded, dig it up in mid to late summer, divide the rhizomes, and replant the healthiest pieces with their tops just at or slightly above the soil surface. That single step keeps the display blooming its very best and gives you free new plants to spread around your deer-resistant beds. Elegant, jewel-toned, and naturally deer-resistant, bearded iris is a stunning choice. Now let's return to that reliable aromatic defense with a long-blooming, easy favorite with number 8. Number 8 brings back that same trusted aromatic defense we saw with lavender and Russian sage, wrapped up in one of the easiest, longest-blooming plants you can grow, catmint or nepeta. Catmint's foliage carries that same pungent, minty, herbal fragrance that deer find genuinely unpleasant. It's a relative of true mint and catnip, and that strong scent that makes cats go wild is precisely what keeps deer at a respectful distance. It's one of the most consistently recommended plants on every deer-resistant gardening list there is, and for very good reason. Picture soft, billowing mounds of silvery green foliage, covered from late spring all the way through summer in clouds of soft, lavender blue flowers. It gives you that dreamy, romantic cottage garden look for months on end, with almost no effort, and unlike some of our other deer-resistant choices, catmint blooms and blooms and blooms for a genuinely long season of color. It's also wonderfully tough and easy, full sun, well-drained soil, and real drought tolerance once established. It isn't fussy about soil quality, and the bees adore it even as the deer avoid it. For your design, Use it as a soft, flowing edging along a front walk, exactly where a passing deer would naturally brush against that repelling fragrance, or massed in drifts for a long ribbon of blue that also happens to protect the beds around it. My tip: about midway through summer, when that first big flush of bloom starts to fade and flop open in the middle, shear the whole plant back by about a third. It bounces back within a couple of weeks with fresh foliage and a whole second wave of flowers. One simple haircut, and you double both the bloom time and the deer-repelling fragrance. Long-blooming, fragrant, and a reliable deer deterrent, catmint earns its place yet again. Now let's bring in an herb that does double duty in the kitchen and the garden with number 9. Number 9 gives you a fragrant, useful, deer-resistant shrub that earns its keep in the kitchen just as much as it does in the front yard: rosemary. Rosemary's woody, resinous, intensely aromatic needle-like leaves are exactly the kind of strong herbal fragrance that deer instinctively avoid. The very same oils that make rosemary so wonderful roasted with potatoes or tucked into a Sunday dinner are precisely what keeps deer from ever taking a bite. It's one of the most dependable herb garden deer deterrents there is, and it does the job while also filling your kitchen with fresh herbs all season. Beyond its usefulness, rosemary is a genuinely handsome plant. It forms an attractive evergreen, in warmer climates, mounding shrub with fine, needle-like blue-green foliage, and in late winter or early spring it covers itself in small, delicate blue flowers that the bees find irresistible. Trailing varieties cascade beautifully over a wall or the edge of a raised bed, while upright varieties make a lovely, fragrant, low hedge. Rosemary loves hot, sunny, dry conditions and excellent drainage. It's a Mediterranean plant at heart, and much like lavender, it thrives on being left alone rather than fussed over. In colder climates, it may need to be treated as an annual or brought indoors for winter, or you can seek out one of the more cold-hardy varieties bred for northern gardens. For your design, plant it along a sunny front walk, where brushing past releases that wonderful fragrance, or tuck it into a large container by the front door where you can snip fresh sprigs for cooking all season long. My tip: resist the urge to overwater rosemary. Far more rosemary plants are lost to soggy roots than to drought. Let the soil dry out noticeably between waterings and give it the sunniest, most well-drained spot you have, and it will reward you with fragrance, flowers, and fresh herbs for years. Fragrant, useful, and deer-resistant, rosemary is a plant that earns its place twice over. Now for our 10th and final plant, and it's the one I promised you at the start, my own personal favorite. Here it is. And here it is, number 10, the plant I saved for last because it surprises so many people, and because it happens to be a genuine personal favorite of mine: ornamental grasses. Now, the reasoning here is a little different from our aromatic and toxic plants. Deer generally avoid ornamental grasses simply because the texture is tough, fibrous, and unappealing compared to the soft, tender perennials and shrubs they'd much rather browse. It isn't a dramatic chemical defense, it's simply that grasses offer very little nutritional reward for the effort of chewing through all that fiber, so deer typically move on to easier, more rewarding meals elsewhere in the yard. And I do love these plants so very much because they bring something no flower can: movement. Those tall, graceful, feathery plumes sway and rustle in the slightest breeze. They catch and glow in the golden light of evening, and they add a soft, contemporary elegance that flowers alone simply cannot achieve. In a deer-resistant garden built around aromatic herbs and tough perennials, ornamental grasses add exactly the light, airy, movement-filled texture that keeps the whole design from feeling static or stiff. They also give you beauty across nearly every season, fresh and green in summer, turning warm golds and bronzes in fall, and standing gracefully through much of winter with their dried plumes catching the frost and snow, giving your deer-resistant yard structure and interest even in the cold months. They're wonderfully low maintenance, too. Most love full sun, they're drought-tolerant once established, and the only chore all year is cutting the whole clump back to a few inches in late winter, right before the fresh new growth begins. For your design, use them for height and movement toward the back of a bed, in groups for a soft, swaying screen, or as a striking specimen rising above your lavender, catmint, and Russian sage. My tip: Choose a clumping variety rather than a spreading one, so it stays exactly where you plant it, and give it room to reach its full, graceful, mature size. Tough, graceful, deer-resistant, and full of movement. Ornamental grasses are my favorite finishing touch. Now let's bring it all together. And there you have it, 10 beautiful plants that deer reliably avoid, from fragrant lavender all the way to those graceful, swaying grasses I love so much. And I hope you noticed the pattern running through this whole list. Strong fragrance, tough texture, or natural toxicity. Understand those 3 defenses and you can start spotting deer-resistant plants everywhere you shop, well beyond just this list of 10. Remember, no plant is entirely deer-proof if a deer is hungry and desperate enough, but fill your front yard with plants like these, and you dramatically shift the odds in your favor, all while building a genuinely gorgeous garden in the process. This isn't a compromise list. It's simply smart, beautiful gardening. So tell me down in the comments, what was your worst deer disaster? The one that finally made you go looking for deer-resistant plants? And which of these 10 are you going to try first? Share it with your growing zone because deer pressure really does vary by region, and I'd love to help you build the perfect deer-resistant plan for your yard. And do go say a warm hello to a fellow deer-battling gardener down there in the comments. Misery loves company, and so does good gardening advice. Coming up next, I'm putting together a video for everyone with just a porch, a patio, or a small space, instead of a big garden bed. 10 beautiful plants for pots and planters, no garden bed required. So make sure you're subscribed with that bell turned on. Until next time, this is Eleanor. Keep your hands in the soil and your heart in the garden. Take care now. Bye-bye.